This is it. We are live from the intergalactic headquarters of Tarot.com here somewhere on the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. I'm Rick Levine, the Tarot.com astrologer. I'm the guy that writes the daily horoscope columns, and we're here today to talk about Mercury Retrograde. How exciting is that? I'm here with Sarah and Maureen and Stacy. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
No, say hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
There you go. Hi, guys. Simon says. In fact, when Mercury is retrograde, Simon says what he said already. All right, so here's the deal. Mercury retrograde gets a totally bad rap. It's not as bad as it sounds, and yet there are some very specific things we need to talk about when we're talking about Mercury retrograde. First of all, let's talk about what the heck a retrograde is. Because, you know, retrograde means the planets go backwards, but I think we're past thinking that the planets actually move backwards. They don't. The fact is that the planets appear to move backwards, and here's how it works. It's like if you're on a train and there's a train going the same direction as you, let's say a freight train that's going slower on the other side of the valley, and there's mountains over there, and you can see that the train that you're on is going faster than the train that you're passing, because you have perspective, and you can see the train against the mountains. But then over the course of time, these two tracks get closer and closer and closer together until the freight train is right on the track next to you. And you look out the window and you're sure that damn thing's going backwards. Because there's nothing to gauge it against. It just looks like you've had this experience perhaps in a subway, for those of you who live in cities where there are subways, or even in a car where you start rolling forward and it looks like the car next to you is going backwards. That's all retrogrades are. A planet turns retrograde when in its regular motion it gets closer to Earth, so we lose perspective. So the inner planets, Mercury and Venus, they get closer to Earth when they come between the Sun and the Earth, because they're in closer to the Sun. So as they're going around the Sun, as they get on the same side as the Sun as the Earth, they come between the Earth and the Sun, and they look like they're going backwards because the Earth is moving faster. With the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they go retrograde when they're on the same side as the Sun as the Earth, but now it looks like the Earth is between them and the Sun, and so the outer planets turn retrograde when they are in opposition to the Sun. So if you have a chart where you have Jupiter opposed the Sun, that Jupiter has to be retrograde. No, okay. So retrograde means that the planet looks like it's going backwards. And this is an important piece of what the energy means. But the other piece that's very important is that it also means the planet is closer to us on Earth. And here's the secret, the hidden piece to understanding retrogrades, is that a planet that's retrograde is louder, like a radio station nearby rather than one that's far away. It's louder, noisier, the energy comes in stronger than regularly. So for Mercury, Mercury is the planet of communication. Mercury is how we send and receive information. Mercury is how we think, it's how we talk, it's how we listen. It's the antenna that we have that has to do with verbal interchange. It's how I write an email. It's what I read when I'm reading my email. It's the coming and going of information, of data. When Mercury turns retrograde, Mercury is closer to Earth. What happens? More data. More information coming, more information going. It's like, let's say you commute to work and every day you go over the same bridge. Mercury retrograde, there's more traffic on that damn bridge. There can be so much traffic on the bridge that there's a traffic jam. Or there can be so much traffic that the bridge actually collapses under the weight. This is the negative side of Mercury retrograde, and that is our communication channels. Think of wires that we have. They're invisible, but they're channels of communication we have with people in our world all around us. And when Mercury turns retrograde, there's more noise, there's more traffic on those channels, which means that the wires can fray, the channels can break down. And this is why it's easy to have misunderstandings, miscommunications, why we can get directions mixed up, we can turn left when we turn right. We have so much going on that we make wrong decisions. There's nothing inherently wrong with a Mercury retrograde. It's only that we have so much data that we can panic and think we need to do something, think we need to say something. It's like thinking one day, Mercury's retrograde, I think I want to go out and get a car. Okay, I think I'm going to go look. And you go look, and the first lot you see has a purple Volkswagen that is like, oh my God, it's like you just fall in love with it. And you buy it on the spot. And then you get home and you realize, oh crap, you know, I can't fit my kayak on the top of this. And what about my 3 kids and the dog? This was really a dumb purchase. The thing is that often what happens when Mercury is retrograde is that we do things without thinking them through because it's exciting, it's in the moment, there's more information, the information is good. It's, you know, there's the classic thing we hear is don't sign a contract while Mercury is retrograde, or travel becomes more complicated when Mercury is retrograde. The problem is that Mercury turns retrograde 3 times a year for about 3 weeks at a time. That means that for 9 weeks, that's over 2 months, that's almost 1/5 of the year, Mercury is retrograde. Do you not do anything during that period of time? That's nuts. That's stupid astrology. To say never sign a contract when Mercury is retrograde is really stupid if you've had your house on the market for a long time, and then the most amazing offer comes through and you go, nope, my astrologer told me never to sign a contract when Mercury is retrograde. That's just dumb thinking. The deal is that the danger is being so excited the house finally sold that you sign the contract without reading it. That's what the danger of Mercury retrograde is. It's read the contract twice. Read the fine print. Get the legal assistance or advice. Don't just do it because it feels good in the moment or because you've waited so long and now you feel like if you don't do it right away, you're going to miss the opportunity. So this is generic Mercury retrograde stuff. The idea that we need to keep things in perspective and that we have more time than we think we do, and it's the doing things out of urgency, out of panic, that typically give Mercury the bad rap, because Mercury is so close to Earth that the whole intellectual, mental thing is speeded up so fast that we're not processing normally. The second part of Mercury retrograde is the fact that from Earth's point of view, it really does look like it's going backwards. And what that means is that it is covering old territory. Now let's back up and talk about this Mercury retrograde in particular so that we can use it as an example and understand how this works. So normally, Mercury, as the fastest moving planet, is whizzing through a sign in about 2 weeks. Normally, it takes Mercury a couple of weeks to go through a sign because it moves a couple of degrees in a day, roughly. So it's about 2-3 weeks in a sign. Mercury actually moved into the sign of Virgo, which we should say is one of Mercury's home signs. Every planet relates to a sign, every sign relates to a planet. Mercury relates to Gemini and Virgo. So in Virgo, Mercury is strong. It's about sifting through the information and finding what information is useful and what information is not. Mercury moved into Virgo on July 30th. Well, it's now the end of August and Mercury is still in Virgo. In fact, Mercury moved through Virgo, reached 29.5 degrees of Virgo, barely almost moved into Libra, but it's slowed down because the planets have to slow down to turn retrograde. It's slowed down And this morning, I say this morning because we're recording on August 30th, which is the day that Mercury stations in order to turn retrograde. Because if you think of the planets turning retrograde, they're like pendulums going back and forth. They're really going around the sun, but we see them as going back and forth. And so in order for a pendulum to change directions, it has to stop and then change directions. And so today, this morning, technically at 6 a.m., and that's, I say, it's not exact because depending upon where you are on the earth, whether you're spinning this way or that way, I mean, this can alter. But this morning, Mercury stopped in its forward movement, in its tracks, and began moving retrograde, although it'll take a half a day or so for us to really see any motion, and a few days for it to pick up speed. So here on August 30th, in the 1 month, Mercury has moved through the sign of Virgo, reached the last degree of Virgo, and it then begins turning retrograde, and it backs up for the next 3 weeks, all the way through September 21st. It turns direct on September 21st at 10:30 p.m., that's Pacific time, which means that if you're in New York, it turns direct on September 22nd, because we have that weird time zone thing where it can be a different day depending upon where you are. So Mercury's retrograde is pretty much for the first 3 weeks of August. It's from first 3 weeks of September. It's from August 30th through September 21st. And then it turns direct, but it turns direct again, it stops. It then moves very slowly, begins inching forward, and it's not until October 7th when Mercury finally leaves Virgo and moves into Libra, which means that normally Mercury spends 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in Virgo, and yet this time it spends 2 months and a week. It spends 9 weeks there. And this is the power of Mercury retrograde, because the slower moving the planet, the more weight, the more intensity, the more events it actually captures. So the fact that Mercury is in Virgo for 9 weeks becomes the significant piece, especially if you happen to be a Virgo or any mutable sign. If you're a Virgo or its opposite sign, Pisces, or a Gemini or a Sagittarius, these are the planets that are most impacted by this, but we're all impacted by all retrogrades. Now let's come back to this particular retrograde. The fact of the matter is that Mercury is recovering the ground that it traveled since the beginning of August. And so there may be events or things that happen to us or ideas that we had in August that we kind of began to work on, and then they slipped away. And now as Mercury is retrograde, those ideas may come back up again, and yet it may be more and more difficult to bring things to fruition, because mentally, intellectually, it's almost like we're traveling backward over ground we've already been over. And for that reason, you often see astrologers use what I call the re-words in order to describe things at Mercury retrograde. Revisit, reconsider, reevaluate, review. You know, it's retrograde. The re-word means again, and so when Mercury retrogrades, we're often covering the same ground again. Then when Mercury turns direct, we get it a third and final time, and during this period of time, it's very important to understand that rather than starting things new, like, I think I'm going to go out and buy a car, and then go buy a car, dumb thing. But if you've been thinking about buying a car for months, and you've been doing the research, and you've been kind of gathering the information, then a retrograde is a great time to rethink and redo what it was that you've already been trying to do. So one of the things is that if you have planets that are in Virgo, Mercury will have come across those planets, conjunct with them, and then retrograde back over them again, and then back over them a third and final time. And this then becomes an important fabric of understanding the timing of how Mercury retrograde works. As an example, we can just note that Mercury in the sky lined up or joined with Jupiter. We've had this cluster of planets toward the end of Virgo. We've had Venus, which has now moved into Libra, but we've had Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury all at the end of Virgo. So Mercury came across Venus and across Jupiter around the 22nd of August. And now Mercury turns retrograde, and over the next couple of days it lines back up with Jupiter again, joins Jupiter on September 2nd. And then when it turns direct, it lines up with Jupiter a third and final time on October 11th. So looking at these dates and understanding Mercury lining up with Jupiter gives us big ideas. Jupiter, big thoughts, expands our thinking. So if you look back at your calendars, at your Outlook, at your daytimers, and you think, what was I imagining or dreaming or thinking of back around August 22nd? And how does that relate to what I'm thinking now or around the beginning of September? And then project that forward to October and say, what can I bring into fruition by then? That is the best and highest use of Mercury retrograde.